A very good morning to one and all present here. And today we are here with Aengus Burns from Galway Chamber and with Greer Deal from the Global Regulatory Services. And this is the opening ceremony for IVDR Celebration Week, which is presented by Media, brought to you by Global Regulatory Services in association with Health and Innovation Hub Ireland, the Non-Health Solutions for Dairy Development, Galway Chamber, Medilink Midlands, and our friends at Indian Embassy at Dublin, Ireland, and not forgetting our resource partners from all across the globe who are sharing this and tweeting all about it since day one. So yes, before we move on to the session and before I introduce your speakers to you, I would like to take a minute or so to discuss about IVDR Celebration Week and what's happening. So as we all know, for the friends in the MedTech sector and for the friends who are new to the MedTech sector, the European Union is going to witness a drastic shift in the regulations where medical device directives, MDD, last year transitioned to MDR, which is medical device regulations. And now there is a new regulation coming in right from 26th May 2022, known as the In Vitro Diagnostics Regulations. And there is a lot going to change in the spectrum. So we at Media at Global Regulatory Services, along with our resource partners, have taken this initiative to demystify all the doubts and the questions around IVDR, and we will be providing you with an ample of resources and make sure that you are hashtag IVDR ready. So yes, in order to talk more about this, we are organizing a series of fireside chats, and today is the opening ceremony where we have the Galway Chamber's president, Aengus Burns, and co-founder and director of Global Regulatory Services and Media, Mrs. Greer Deal. And slowly and gradually, we will move into the session. So again, if you guys have any questions related to IVDR or anything that you wish to talk or share about, don't forget to use the hashtag IVDR ready and use your comment box, and we will make sure that all your questions and queries are answered and addressed. So we're not wasting much time, I would like to invite Greer Deal, Director and Co-founder at Global Regulatory Services and Media, to talk to you all about IVD regulations, what's coming in, and give you all an overview on how things are going to look like starting from 26th May 2022. Over to you, Greer.
Thanks ever so much, Jay, and welcome everybody to this week-long sessions of live sessions to talk about IVD. So and specifically the new regulation. So welcome everybody, and I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour through the regulation, but obviously during the week we will drill down into certain areas and provide you with more insights. So welcome. So initially I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Global Regulatory Services, which is the parent company of Media. It's an award-winning consultancy focusing on regulatory affairs and quality compliance across the whole of the life sciences, and literally the clue is in the name, it is global. So we're able to provide in-country expertise as well as the scientific, technical and regulatory know-how that companies will need. It's headquartered in Cambridge in the UK. And as you know, Media is part of Global Regulatory Services, and we decided to spin out Media a few years ago because of the changing regulations and the fact that, you know, medtech entrepreneurs, you're making the technology far more complicated now, and it means that the regulations need to keep up, and so we wanted to be able to provide you with a dedicated, focused consultancy with all things to do with all things medtech, and that's why Media came about. In addition, it means that there is a footprint in Europe, in the lovely city of Galway in Ireland, but also a footprint in Great Britain, which means that we can cover both territories as a result of Brexit. So yes, the GRS business model is that we're a network of specialists all around the world, like I said, offering that in-country expertise. And those local contacts are really, we have found, are very critical in the success of commercializing a product in your target market, because those local contacts have a really good working relationship with their regulatory authorities. So, like I said, close working relationship with key regulatory bodies. It means that we are an email or a phone call away from most of these authorities, and it means that we can very quickly be able to give our clients a steer guidance which they can rely on, because you now understand what the authorities are expecting in terms of your requirements and how you need to comply with those requirements. And yeah, we focus on regulatory affairs, quality, compliance, but actually we can't work in a silo. No one in the sector can. We're like one big jigsaw puzzle, and every bit needs to fit in. So there is overlap with other areas, for example, pricing and reimbursement, clinical studies. And so through that, we actually know an awful lot of people around the world who we can tap into, who we can engage on behalf of our clients, bringing all this expertise together for you, the diagnostic companies. So now moving on to MedIDR, which focuses on all things medtech and the wellness borderline products. So again, dedicated to regulatory and quality compliance in the medtech sector. Yes, based in Galway, Ireland, a real hotbed for innovation. I mean, Ireland is anyway, but particularly Galway, and that'll be discussed a little bit later. So yes, we're powered, MedIDR is powered by Global Regulatory Services, the parent company. So, if you need to go global, MedIDR can work with the specialists in GRS to help companies achieve their global vision. At MedIDR, we love regulatory strategy. Someone has to. It's very important that you can get your regulatory strategy so that you know what your pathway is to market. And yes, we even dream about quality management systems, and we'll be drilling down into that as the week goes by. And we do have a good chat, a good banter with the regulatory authorities. A lot of people think that they're big daddy, and constantly telling people, no, you can't do this, and no, you can't do that. But actually, you can work with them. And, if you speak the same language in terms of regulatory language, you'll get on fine. And yes, we absolutely love helping you, the entrepreneurs, all the companies with your innovative devices. We love helping you get your product to the market for the benefit of patients. After all, at the end of the day, we're all going to be patients, and our family and friends as well. So a few above and beyond services. We offer 24/7 services which have legal responsibilities through both companies. So in GRS, bearing in mind GRS covers the whole of the life sciences, so responsible person for cosmetics in the UK, and also responsible person for medical devices and diagnostics, should you be wanting to launch into the UK. Then specifically for Europe, MedIDR provides authorised representative services for medical devices and diagnostics. And that's for any company that doesn't have a presence in Europe but wants to sell into Europe. Again, there's a new role, person responsible for regulatory compliance. The new role is being brought in by the regulations. And for some companies, you can outsource that to a consultancy like MedIDR. Again, responsible person for cosmetics. And also we do offer to a few institutions the service of clinical trial legal representative. And then finally for the US, between the two companies, we can actually help you launch into the US because we have US agents who can liaise direct with the US FDA on your behalf. And that is a mandatory requirement to enter the US market. So now, in vitro diagnostic regulations, this is what this whole week is about. Just around the corner now, next month, it's all going to happen. But some of you may be wondering, regulatory affairs, why do we bother? What are they here for? And if you read the quote, you'll see that it's all about controlling quality, safety, and efficacy of your devices. Yeah. Now it's very interesting how they do it in that order: quality first, safety, and then finally efficacy. So this is what regulatory is all about: ensuring that the product is produced to a very high standard. So that's your quality. That it's safe. So you're doing all your testing. So biocompatibility, human factor testing, your clinical studies, to check that it's safe and isn't going to do anything untoward to the patient or to the clinician or healthcare practitioner who will be using your diagnostic. And then finally, efficacy. You need to prove your claims. So that is what regulatory affairs is all about. Now, Jay has already mentioned that the medical device regulation has already come into full force, the new one. As of 26th of May next month, we have the in vitro diagnostic regulation coming into force. And this is what this whole week is all about. In Great Britain, because Brexit happened before the regulation, the new EU regulations came out, they've actually stayed with the old style directives for now, because those are the directives that actually got incorporated into UK law. But that looks like that's going to change. But anyway, now we're going to be talking about EU IVDR. So yes, ring in the changes. For diagnostic companies, it's a massive, massive change for you, far more so than medical device companies. So under the old directive, I'm sure many of you will already be aware, the risk classifications for your diagnostics was based on a list-based approach. So you'd look at the directive and you'd look at where your type of diagnostic was listed, and that would then determine the classification, the risk classification. So whether you can self-declare, which means you don't need to engage with an authorized and notified body, or whether you're a higher risk classification and therefore you have to engage with a notified body, and there are more requirements that you need to meet. Now, interestingly, and I've just said this is a massive change going from the directive to the regulation, and that's because so many diagnostic devices before were so low risk that most were self-declared, but it's all changed. So there's new classification under the new regulation, under the IVDR, and this is based on a rule-based approach. And if you, like us, if you want, you can have a look through the regulation, which you should be doing. And there are 10, what we call 10 implementing rules and 7 classification rules. And basically that all boils down to that there are 4 risk classifications, A, B, C, and D. And as you can see, A is the lowest risk classification and D is the highest. So A is where you can self-declare. D is where it's the highest risk and you've got a lot more hoops to jump through, and you definitely need to engage with a notified body. And that's actually for any risk classification B, C, and D that you need to engage with a notified body. So this is what's happening, is a lot of diagnostics are going to be up classified. And the example here is the SARS-CoV-2 test. Before, under the directive, it was self-declared. But now you're going to find under the regulation, it's up classified to the highest risk classification. So you can see already there's going to be a massive shift from having to comply with more regulations in being able to market your product. So, and what does it really mean? Up classification means that you're going to have to involve a notified body. And the notified body is going to review your technical file, and they're going to audit you in terms of your quality management system. So those are the key aspects. Now, with the directive, only about 15-20% of diagnostic companies needed to engage with a notified body. But now, under the regulation, we're talking about 85% of diagnostic companies will need to engage with a notified body. So again, you can see there's this massive change and the burden on diagnostic companies has really, really increased. So what does this mean to you if you've already got product out there, or you're in the process of developing a diagnostic for the EU market? You need to go back and revisit your intended purpose statement and look at the complexity of the device and where you're actually going to be placing it. So in what environment is it going to be used? Is it going to be used in the home? Is it going to be used in primary care or in hospitals? Think about where it's going to be used. And then you need to reconfirm the risk classification of your diagnostic. And I would actually recommend that you get someone outside of the company to do that for you, because they will be truly objective and be able to guide you through that process and determine your risk classification. Now, if there's any grey areas, then I would also recommend that you engage with your notified body, if you have one. May take some time to engage one, or you could go to your competent authority. So in Ireland, that's the HPRA, and get their advice and their guidance on what they think your risk classification is. When you do that, though, you should be presenting evidence to the authorities to say, this is our reasoning behind why we think our device is this risk classification. Do you agree? And that helps them to make a decision. Okay. And this is what I was talking about earlier, about speaking the language of the regulators. So yes, I have known companies who say, we want our device to be, for example, a Group A, because it's self-declaration, you don't need a notified body. Actually, what you want isn't always the reality. And that's why I think it's important that you get an outside specialist to review the classification of your diagnostic. So what else is happening? I focus very much on the sort of up classification, so defining your device, getting the risk classification. But the IVDR is also bringing in other changes or placing greater emphasis in other areas. So there's actually clarification on the obligation of the economic operators, and the economic operators includes obviously the legal manufacturer, but your authorized representatives, importers and distributors. Before it was a little fuzzy about the roles and responsibilities. Now it's much, much clearer. And since a lot of diagnostic devices are made up of several components, and those components come from different suppliers, as a legal manufacturer, you must make sure that you have control of that whole supply chain. And that's why you need to understand the different roles and responsibilities of the economic operators within that supply chain. So yes, there's the EU authorised representative under the directive that tended to be more of a post box address, just so that you had an address in Europe, and that meant you could sell your devices, your diagnostics into Europe. Now your EU authorised representative is equally liable with the legal manufacturer for placing diagnostics on the European market. So that means, the insurance is the same. The legal responsibility is exactly the same as the legal manufacturer. So just be wary of that if you're needing to appoint an EU authorised representative. I mentioned earlier that there's this whole new role that's been created under the regulations, and that's person responsible for regulatory compliance. Now, we'll go into that in more detail as the week goes along. But it is for companies who meet the criteria of being a micro or small company, it is possible to outsource that role. And that's something that Medidia can provide. Much more emphasis on risk management, so the what ifs, and how you mitigate that risk, and also the quality management systems. So very important to have robust quality management systems from the beginning, in support of the development and commercialization of your diagnostics. It also helps you control your whole supply chain. Post-market surveillance, very, very important, much more emphasis placed on that. and UDIs, unique device identifiers. There's a whole raft of activities around that, and we actually have a session dedicated to that later on in the week. And Unimed, this is all about transparency. So it's like a massive database where you have to register, and it's so that the authorities and the public up to a certain point can see what's going on, really. The trouble is Unimed is taking a long time to be rolled out, and it's being rolled out in stages. So you need to keep an eye on what's going on. Clinical evidence, so that's your performance evaluation for diagnostics. There's much more emphasis on being able to prove what you're claiming, okay? And this isn't a case of just ticking a box, oh, I've done that, and that can just sit on a shelf and I'm compliant. You're continually having to revisit and review, monitor, update. So it's a whole life cycle approach. It just goes round and round and round, so that you continually improve your devices and your systems. So date of application, I think it's pretty clear. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, I hope it's been postponed because there's so much work to be done. Afraid not. It's still the 26th of May 2022. However, a longer transition period has been agreed. And guess what? I mean, a lot of that's down to COVID-19. Being in the diagnostics sector, so many labs and companies obviously got drawn into being able to provide a solution for COVID-19 and to provide rapid response to testing. So, resource, time, energy, etc., was very much focused on dealing with the COVID pandemic. In addition to that, there are very few EU notified bodies that are designated to actually deal with IVDR. So if you see the stats here, I mean, 6 IVDR EU notified bodies compared to 3 UK approved bodies who can actually take on diagnostic companies. I put in here NANDO. Keep an eye on NANDO because that will list the EU notified bodies that become designated under the IVDR, and it will also list their areas of specialty. And that's important when you're looking at EU notified bodies, engaging with someone that's taking on new clients, designated under IVDR, but also is familiar with your type of technology. And these notified bodies have to conduct conformity assessments under their old directives as well as the new regulation. So, their resources are really being very, very stretched at the moment. And again, I mentioned earlier, there's substantial changes for you people in the IVD sector. It's a huge culture change, going from a relatively light regulatory system to a much more stringent system where most of you now will need to engage with an EU notified body. Class A and new products have to be fully compliant with the IVDR as from the 26th of May 2022, and that's a month away, so you haven't got long. And here I just thought I'd put a slide up of the key transition dates. So 26th of May, vigilance and post-market surveillance requirements will apply to all IVDs, even if you're registered under the IVD directive. And I've already said that all new IVDs in Class A's, non-sterile and self-declared, must also be compliant. And then there are the dates that you can see there. So thank you very much. That was a real whistle-stop tour through the regulations, but we'll drill down into that more in subsequent sessions during the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Greer, for giving us an overview of what's going to happen with IVDR. And definitely, I'm sure, for all of us who are staying for the entire week-long celebrations, they are going to understand much in detail about different aspects of IVD regulations coming into the effect. But now, since this is the opening ceremony, definitely we are not going to drill down to the specific topics. And I would like to now invite on stage and pass on this podium to the President of Galway Chamber, Aengus Burns, who will now talk about how Galway is the heart of the global MedTech hub, And definitely, Galway is your step solution into the European Union. So, yes, over to you, Angus. You are on mute, Angus. I will help you unmute.
Got it. Got it. You think after 2 years of remote working and this technology that you'd have the mute button fixed. But look, thankfully, I don't have to walk onto stage, Jay, or go up to the podium. You don't have to wait for that, and it's much quicker to be able to get to chat to you guys. So look, a few words in Irish. Gwyn Ushla agus a cardi galéir, Wadlam Falcherov heard Gachdina Gadi on Okod Inchuk Shu. That is not the language of the regulator. In Ireland, you'd be pleased to know it's just a bit of Irish language, and Galway's a bilingual city, even though English is very much the primary language used day to day. So I hope you don't mind the bit of Irish there. Look, I'm delighted to be taking part in today's in vitro diagnostic regulation IVDR Celebration Week. The opening ceremony organised by MedTech and Greer UN Global Regulatory Services. So thanks, Greer, and Ambassador Akhilesh will be on later, joining me today as speakers. I'm the current president of Galway Chamber, which is a business organisation representing about 500 members, member companies who in turn employ about 30,000 people in Galway. So when you consider the population of Galway, about 80,000 people, it's a significant representative organisation, and many of our members are in the medtech space. The medtech industry hugely important to Ireland, and Ireland hopefully to the medtech sector also, where Ireland exports total more than 13 billion euro in the industry annually, with 300 plus companies employing more than 40,000 people, making Ireland the largest medtech employer per capita in Europe, according to the Irish MedTech Association. And the country's been fertile ground for the industry with what we would say is a highly educated workforce. We've been working on that for a number of years, getting the levels of third level education up. Recent OECD Industry at a Glance report indicated that 56% of 25 to 34-year-olds had received higher education versus an OECD average of 44%. So, you know, the focus on education has been something that the country's worked on for a number of years, trying to get some kind of a competitive advantage to swell industry in the country, and it's clearly working now. We'd always say close cooperation between industry and academic institutions is key to meeting sectoral needs and to building clusters. And it's that cluster in Galway that I want to talk to today. We think it's been quite successful. I would say Galway is at the centre of the Irish medtech sector, population 80,000 people, situated in, I'm sure Greer and Jay, you'll agree, is a very beautiful part of the country. Vibrant cultural artistic scene, attracts lots of tourists and visitors. And look, I think that's part of it. You know, people come to visit the place. They get a feel for a nice kind of vibrant city centre, lots of nice pubs and restaurants, lots of street music, lots of students, really lively, and they say, you know what, this isn't a bad place to visit, and it's not a bad place to actually come to live in. So it's also a student town. We've now two universities: the National University of Ireland in Galway, better known as NUIG, and the Atlantic Technological University, used to be known as GMIT, the tech, it now has university status. And the city is home to over 25,000 students with large engineering and medical faculties. So it's been a big university town for a long time. And of course, there's no coincidence now that it's reaping dividends, particularly on the engineering and medical fronts. Over half the industrial employment of the city is medtech, with 8 of the world's top 10 medtech companies located in Galway. For example, Boston Scientific and Medtronic, both large employers with over 5,000 Galway-based employees, engaged primarily in the manufacture of cardiovascular medical devices. So just in terms of how the cluster came about, I'm not sure how many people on the call are from Galway, Ireland. I sense a good few are, but speaking to Jay earlier, I think there's a lot from abroad who perhaps have not visited Ireland or Galway before. Go back to the 1970s. I suppose Ireland joined the EEC as the newest and I think definitely the poorest country to join the EEC at the time. Continued to be large-scale emigration out of Ireland. If you would hark back 150 years in Ireland, and particularly the west of Ireland, would have had twice the population that it does now. So enormous emigration, particularly to the UK and the USA. And probably the upside of that is the very significant links, particularly with the States and that kind of diaspora link that is definitely a factor in being able to do business. So large scale immigration, very limited industrial base. So government policies focusing on attracting foreign direct investment through regional grant incentives, ready to go factory buildings, low corporation tax, of course, and a young, educated English-speaking workforce. So a few things in the mix there. And the first foreign-owned medtech company in Ireland was Beckman Coulter, set up in Galway at that time, back in the 70s. Later arrivals included C.R. Bard, 1982, Boston Scientific in 1994, and the latter two focused on the production of drug-eluting stents for cardiology, with mainly low value added manufacturing and assembly line operations. So you can see where things have started. Certainly not a cluster in those days, trying to attract in the big FDI to get a bit of traction in the industry. It wasn't all plain sailing in Galway at the time. The early 1990s, the largest private employer in Galway was the Digital Equipment Corporation, fantastic company. It was a US computer manufacturer, but unfortunately went bust on a global scale. In Galway, which was a smaller city than now, 700 job losses. However, the silver lining to that was that base of engineers and technicians then went on to work in smaller companies, and most chose to stay in Galway. And I think it's that stickiness of the city, as I said, quite a pleasant place to stay and live, which in turn we think spawned quite a strong entrepreneurial culture and a willingness to build businesses in Galway, whether they're indigenous businesses or parts of a business of a large FDI company. So it's about that taking of responsibility to not, I suppose, wait till the business comes to you, but saying, look, we want to be based here. We want to be in this region. We want to raise our families here. So therefore, we're going to use what is around us, whether we work in a large FDI company or whether we're striking out on our own, to actually take responsibility and to build a business and attract business, international business to Galway. That culture of wanting to build futures in Galway encouraged local managers to take greater responsibility from US headquarters with FDI companies, in particular in the move towards higher end product design and development, fed by skilled labor from the local third level colleges. So that industrial strategy of attracting FDI through low cost and low tax to create manufacturing jobs and stop the brain drain of university graduates, which was a really big deal in the 80s and 90s. We were producing all these graduates only to have them leave the country, go to London and the States, but to stop that brain drain, to a strategy of moving up the value chain to create high value jobs. And this also required attracting talent to a location that has lots of opportunity, not just one-off opportunities, but lots of opportunity around, and is, of course, a pleasant place to live and work. We're seeing the dividends at the moment. Just this month, Boston Scientific announced a €100 million expansion of its operations in Galway. So you further 300 jobs, I think it's actually 400 jobs, but announces 300 jobs on top of the current 4,000 staff in Galway. And it followed the creation of its €60 million equipment technology centre in 2019. And similarly, in 2013, Medtronic Galway opened its Customer Innovation Centre, also developing innovative therapies. And as it stands, in Medtronic has 23 global leaders based in Galway, which I think is a phenomenal number for such a small city. So that's not people directly working in the local facility. They're working on on a global scale, but they happen to be based in Galway. So again, local managers taking responsibility for themselves, stepping up, and trying to make a bigger go of things, all from the location in Galway. Increased R&D activity allowed local skilled employees, specialised suppliers to grow in numbers, so suppliers feeding into the FDI hub, creating a pool of staff, lots of supporting companies for more foreign-owned med tech companies to come to Galway. And we would say that was a snowballing effect, of the cluster. So, it's a bit like your shop down the street. They'll never survive on their own. They need lots of shops around them, and that is the cluster effect. It creates a large pool of labour. There's a bit of movement allowed. It allows people to strike off on their own, brought through the system of the FDI companies, and creates a general cluster where if you're investing in the location, you're pretty happy that you're going to be able to find the pool of resources and the know-how locally. And that's what a cluster is about. And we think we have that in Galway. So from the late 1990s, particular, entrepreneurial employees started to design and develop their own medical devices. So not just feeding in as specialized suppliers, but also striking out on their own in the design and development. And a wave of startups, some of whom have become global players, like John Power and Aerogen. I think he started out in Bards, and Aerogen is now the world's leading aerosol drug delivery product supplier to many of the world's ventilators, still primarily privately owned, and John leads it day to day. Somewhat different, but hugely successful also. Creganna Medical scaled successfully on its own to global sales of 230 million by 2015, and then sold to TE Connectivity in 2016. But has continued growth at its Galway location, which is just fantastic. So I suppose if you were to go back to the 70s and 80s and think, what were we trying to establish here? We'd no capital of our own, no engineering base, no real history of engineering in the country, to import that foreign capital, foreign investment in, facilitate as much as possible, say yes to everything, remove the barriers to get that kind of traction, to get that kind of clustering, to allow then some of our smart people to work through those FDI companies and then to strike out on their own, while also attracting more and more FDI to the location. So that's the strategy, and I suppose if you stick to it, eventually it'll work. So we'd say also that Indigenous Galway business then moved from that mainly supply piece of subcontract to FDI companies through to that design and development of their proprietary MedTech products, but even beyond cardiovascular, and including respiratory, gastroenterology, pulmonary urology, medical software. And we've even seen serial entrepreneurs now successfully selling startups and going again a second or third time, becoming business angels, a huge part of the funding ecosystem. And that's become a real feature of the Galway MedTech cluster, particularly when those angels and entrepreneurs are living in the locality. So it's easy to pop out and have a cup of coffee with them. Very small location. This is not Manhattan we're talking about. This is Galway. On the funding side, look a very helpful state system of funding supports, particularly in the early stages, through the state investment body Enterprise Ireland, as well as local bodies such as Údarás na Gaeltachta, which will be focused on the Irish language speaking areas, and the Western Development Commission's Western Investment Fund has allowed startups fund their initial growth, so to get them moving. Local training programs supporting MedTech startup ecosystem include BioInnovate, which is a national training program in NUI Galway, one of our two universities, which brings researchers, clinicians, industry reps together to collaborate and develop their medical tech. Also in NUI Galway is the Health Innovation Hub Ireland, which helps MedTech startups access the Irish healthcare system, so to really get access to practical knowledge. And to achieve that, it offers assistance in identifying the best clinical teams and locations for them to carry out pilot studies on their products. And then the other side of town, the other university, the MET, Medical and Engineering Technologies Gateway, is an interdisciplinary applied research centre at the Atlantic Technological University, which again generates solutions for the close to market needs of companies. Accelerator programs then, such as NUI Galway's BioExcel, help to develop and grow the startup medtech businesses in that environment that I spoke about with like-minded entrepreneurs and experienced mentors. So if you get everybody in the same place, the ideas are going to bounce off people, lots of ideas. People have done things before. And you know what they say, connections is good for business. The more connections you can create, the more business you will do. It's easier when people are in the same location. So that collaborative nature of the Galway MedTech cluster is seen in the ability to adapt and scale up. Particularly we saw it with the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, where some of the production lines were going 24 hours, stepping up with new technologies. Aerogen in particular developed an aerosol that can deliver vaccines, which is quite different to the usual way that you would deliver vaccines. So there's constant kind of regular breakthroughs in medical device technology, and that strong locally based network and cluster of entrepreneurial businesses, we think can really effectively navigate regulatory product development and funding challenges. And it's great to see Greer and her organization, arriving in. And look, my day job is in an accountancy firm and financial services, and we see the wave of regulatory coming across all industries. MedTech is no different. It creates barriers, of course, but it obviously ups the game for everybody and creates opportunities. And those who are serious in the space then will come through much stronger. And as a result, we think Galway is well placed. A bit about Galway Chamber. We ourselves have two subsidiary companies, Galway Technology Centre and Galway City Innovation District, which is better known as Portashed. It's also an accelerator. They both host about 50 smaller size companies and startups, currently employing about 500 people in the city across a small number of campuses and co-working spaces. So it's very much that collaborative piece of sharing a bench when you're a startup, being able to bounce ideas off somebody at the coffee machine. We find that really works. If you spread people around the country and they've nobody to talk to, connections make business. So there's MedTech, but the co-working spaces in particular are very focused on ICT, as you'd expect. That there is a strong ICT cluster in Galway. I suppose we would see the future as being ICT working more closely with the MedTech sector. So the physical kind of product-led engineers maybe having to move to a bit more of the digital space, and not being an expert, but obviously we see a movement on home diagnostics and self-management of illness and that kind of space. We think there's a real coming together. It's of course a risk that if Galway doesn't wean itself away from the production lines and the physical product and not embrace digital, then possibly it might miss the boat. And look, the same goes from the regulatory standpoint as well. If you don't embrace regulation, then you will be left behind. So there's some of the risks, but always an eye to the future. US investment was attracted substantially by successful education tax investment policies. This allowed Galway to create this MedTech cluster. We would say a focus is now on strengthening policies to allow smaller indigenous players to thrive and enhance that dynamic entrepreneurial culture and allowing the cluster to continue its growth on a sustainable basis. It's not about turning the back on FDI at all. It's about bringing more FDI in. But I think, foreign investment likes to see a vibrant, innovative scene, not only in their own organizations, but outside their organizations. They don't want to land in the middle of nowhere and not have the sense that there's a really vibrant medtech culture around them. And I think that's really is one of the secrets to the cluster. Not hard to replicate. as you can see, it's taken 50 years to pull it together. Look, thanks so much for letting me speak today. Hopefully, Jay, I didn't ramble on too long. I hope everybody here enjoys the IVDR Celebration Week, and wish you all great success in your medtech pursuits.
Thank you so much, Angus. That was really interesting to listen how Galway has developed over the years. And at Medidia, we believe that don't let regulations hold back your innovation. And that is exactly what your message also highlighted, because Galway and all the other medtech technologies around the world are using Galway to make the development in the medtech space. So definitely regulations might be a barrier to them, but again, there are connections all across, and all of us can make sure that there is nothing stopping their innovation. So yes, continuing your message, what we would also like to say is people should keep on innovating new and new technologies in the medical field, and they shouldn't be worried about the regulatory affairs. Well, because that's why Medidia and GRS will step in. If not, you have friends at Galway Chamber who will help you with different connections and always make sure that your innovation, your ideas turn out to be successful businesses, changing the future and for the better good. So definitely, yes, thank you so much, Angus, for your motivating words. And I'm sure people around the world will make Galway as their landing point to enter into the European Union. And continuing on to this message, we were expecting Indian ambassador to Ireland, His Excellency Akhilesh Mishra, to also join this call, but he couldn't join because of his ongoing commitments. But he has sent us a video message, especially for IVDR Celebration Week. So I will put on that message for everyone to view. And after that, if anyone would have any questions, please use the comment box to ask any questions if you have, or then after the message, we will connect back. So yes, here is the message from His Excellency Akhilesh Mishra ji, Indian Ambassador to Ireland. And yeah.
Namaskar. My very warm greetings to you all from Indian Embassy in Dublin. At the outset, I would like to express my very sincere gratitude to Mr. Jay Shahji and Greer Deal of MedDTA for inviting me to this excellent program on the medical devices sector. This sector is extremely important for India and indeed a very high priority for our country. Particularly in the context of the post-corona environment, the experience of past 2 years has shown to us that healthcare is not just a matter of concern to the doctors or the patients or the medtech business community, but the resilience, the strength of the healthcare institution and healthcare infrastructure in its entirety is becoming increasingly a really strategic matter of concern, and it impinges on the society as a whole, not just the people who are affected. Secondly, the corona pandemic has also brought to the fore the very painful questions about the nature of our globalized and interdependent society, our existence as a whole. This is a wake-up call for all of us to think about the sustainability and resilience and uh, redundancies in the supply chains and the connectivities that we are establishing for international trade. A country like India, which has about 1.4 billion people, and also the population density is so intense. We have extremely high degree of vulnerability to disruptions in supply chains. So we have no doubt to work to convert our ways of business, our transportation links, our supply chains in a manner which are more resilient to future shocks and catastrophes. That is why our Prime Minister Honorable Narendra Modi ji gave the nation the wake-up call to embrace the ethos of local for global. There has to be greater stress on optimizing use of locally available resources and local talent and local traditional knowledge so that the supply chains are shorter and they are more resilient. And in this context, for India in the MedTech sector, the highest priority remains to boost domestic manufacturing. India currently is one of the largest med devices market. About 750 to 800 medical devices companies are working in India. Majority of them are multinational companies, but also we have a growing number of domestic Indian manufacturers in this segment. But still, about 80% of our dependency for medical devices sector is on imports from other countries. And our exports are quite modest, around $2.5 billion a year in medical devices segment. So we need to prioritize manufacturing of medical devices and medtech solutions within India. That is our highest priority and national mission. And in this context, I'm very happy to share that our Prime Minister Modi ji has taken a lot of interesting initiatives to make India a more attractive place to manufacture. About 60,000 kilometers of national highways have been constructed. About 24,000 kilometers of railways have been electrified during Prime Minister Modi's regime. About 38 new airports have been operationalized. So we are witnessing a transformation of the physical infrastructure, which had been the single biggest bottleneck in boosting India's infrastructure. Also, on the policy front, the government has introduced a large number of reforms, including sector-specific policies in the medical devices sector. Also, 100% FDI is allowed in medical devices sector, both for greenfield projects and for brownfield projects. And most significantly, the government has announced production-linked incentives, which will go a long way in making India a really attractive place to make large-scale manufacturing within the country, not only for India's needs, but also for global requirements. Also, several state governments have been very proactive and they have developed their own policies and proposals for creating specialized medical devices manufacturing hubs. And specialized zones have been allocated to make medtech manufacturing parks in Tamil Nadu, in UP, and MP, in Himachal Pradesh, and many others are taking similar initiatives. The third component is massive thrust on boosting domestic startup and entrepreneurship culture. India is now the third largest cluster of startups. We have close to 70,000 startup companies registered in India. India is also the third largest unicorn base globally. We have around 92 unicorns, and 46 unicorns were created only last year in 2021. So it's a very, very vibrant startup and innovation ecosystem that is evolving in India. The government of India is extremely supportive, and there are very convenient financial products which are available for startups. Specialized agencies are providing grant and support for innovative solutions and encouraging youth-led entrepreneurship. So this is changing the game of technology development within the country. Friends, with regard to the India-Ireland partnership, I'm very excited that our countries have really complementary strengths in medical devices segment. Also, the unique locational advantage of Ireland and similarly strategic location of India, uh, they are very different in terms of strategic connectivities. Also, our diaspora connectivities, Ireland's very large diaspora and also India's very large diaspora dispersed in over 100 countries. in a very significant concentration. These are also complementary. And therefore, I see there is a genuine logic, compelling rationale for our countries to work even more closely and enable uh, business communities from our countries to work together, partner, and become each other's force multipliers. Uh, Ireland is an extremely vibrant, innovative tech and financial ecosystem. Ireland also has the advantage of being part of OECD and European Union, and therefore they are always very high in benchmarking and quality standards. Similarly, India can provide value to our Irish friends in the areas of economy of scale, and also providing very huge domestic market. At the same time, India can provide a very large human resource pool. India has second largest pool of scientific and technical manpower, and by 2030 it is estimated that India will have about 1/4 of uh, global skilled manpower pool. Also, 1/4 of the all university graduates produced worldwide will come from Indian universities. This is very important because in future the growth will necessarily require multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-cutting expertise. And therefore availability of a significant number of skilled manpower, highly qualified and competent in a large number of sectors and subsectors would be a great requirement for global industrial growth. Friends, with regard to specific opportunities, one is innovative financing of products. Ireland being very vibrant hub in financing, financial services and fintech, can take lead in creating new products for India-Ireland partnership in medical devices and MedTech sector. Secondly, startup connect between India and Ireland would be mutually beneficial. Thirdly, the domain of education and skilling in themes relating to medical technology and medical devices and healthcare in general uh, uh, could provide a lot of business opportunity for our institutions. Uh, Recently, the University Grants Commission of India uh, has announced specific modalities for internationalization of Indian education and specified specific modalities for twinning arrangements and joint degree programs and dual degree programs. So now we have a clear mandate, clear regulatory procedures mechanism for connecting Indian institutions with Irish institutions. And this is a very significant area for us to work together. I would really appreciate if MDD can take initiative and together with the embassy can host specific webinars on how do we promote trade between India and Ireland in medical devices and medtech sector and startup and academic connect. And also going beyond. Eventually, we need partnerships. We need partnerships beyond transactional trade and robust uh, linkages through technology partnership and manufacturing in India. We in the Indian Embassy, our friends, are always at your disposal. If there's anything we can do to facilitate your understanding of India or improve your connectivities with relevant stakeholders in India, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be very delighted to interact with you and support you, guide you in any manner possible. Once again, my very sincere thanks to Deal family and MedDDR for hosting this event. I wish this interaction and this event a great success. Thank you so much.
Well, that was a very interesting message from the Indian ambassador to Ireland, His Excellency Akhilesh Mishra ji. And thank you so much for sending a video, although he couldn't be here on this call, but he did send a video. And this makes a very important connection between Ireland and India, and definitely resonating with Angus's comments on how Galway is becoming a global cluster for MedTech. And the trading capacities between both the countries can have beautiful boost in the entire medtech space. Apart from that, definitely there is Medidia and Global Regulatory Services to help any of these medtech startups to navigate the regulatory complications that may be there in either of the countries and all across the world. Well, with that, this is up from all the keynote speakers. And with this, we make IVDR Celebration Week officially opened. And now we will be going on with different series of sessions. So today at 2 p.m., we will be live again, talking about overview on IVD regulations in the European Union. We will be drilling into the topic, and we will find out more facts and upcoming key deadlines and dates that an innovator needs to keep in mind, and to make sure that their devices are compliant with all the upcoming regulations. So thank you all to the entire audience for tuning in and joining us. And a very big thank you to all our resource partners, which includes Galway Chamber, Midlink Midlands, Fortieri Development, Xenon Health Solutions, GS1 Ireland, Health and Innovation Hub Ireland, Embassy of India, Dublin, Ireland. And last but not the least, a very big thank you to Aengus and to Greer Deal, who have joined, who have taken time out from their busy schedules to open and inaugurate this entire IVDR Celebration Week. Well, that's all from our side. And Aengus or Greer, would you like to say anything to our audience?
Aengus, after you.
Just best of luck to everybody.
Thank you. One thing that I will say, which probably isn't a business thing as such, but we talked about Ireland and Galway in particular being a lovely place. Well, Bobby Deal and myself, as the founders of Medidia and GRS, but particularly with Medidia, I've got to say that we were directed by our hearts first to set up in Galway, and then our head second. Now, a lot of business advisors will go, "Whoa, no." you got to do the market research first and check out, that it's all commercially viable, etc., etc. But we so fell in love with Galway and just went, this has got to be the place to set up our company. So there you go. I shared a little secret with you.
Thanks for that, Greer. That's really nice. And look, everybody's welcome in Galway, always. Please come.
Exactly. And a very warm welcome we had indeed. So thank you very much.
So, yes, thank you for all your lovely comments. And with this, we will mark the adjournment of the closing ceremony, and we will continue with the week-long celebrations. So see you back again at 2 p.m. And till that time, make sure that you are #IVDR ready. So yes, thank you once again.